When we think of podcast platforms, we tend to think of either Apple Podcasts or more recently Spotify. But there is another massive player in the market that a lot of people tend to neglect, and that is YouTube. We still think of YouTube as a place for mostly short, entertaining video clips, but in the last couple of years that has changed dramatically. And with it, entire podcast empires emerged, amassing millions and in some cases billions of views. So in this video, I'm gonna give you a brief overview of the best podcasts available on YouTube right now. And the first one on the list is the H3 podcast. The podcast is hosted by Ethan and Hila Klein, both of them long-term YouTubers, started back in 2013 with their channel H3H3, and since then have amassed millions of subscribers on that channel. So a few years back, they decided to launch a podcast on YouTube as well, H3 Podcast, and since then have grown it to more than 2 million subscribers on that channel as well. Now, since Ethan and Hila have been on YouTube for that long, naturally a lot of the guests on the podcast are YouTubers as well. And if I'm being completely honest, those are not the episodes that I'm most interested in. I just don't care so much about Jake Paul or Ninja. But what makes this podcast so fascinating is that they have a wide variety of guests. And that includes top tier comedians like Bill Burr, Bert Kreischer, Chris D'Elia, Theo Vaughn, but also people who are a bit more serious like Andrew Yang, who recently ran for president, or George Peterson. So if you are looking for a funny, entertaining podcast with the occasional deep conversation, then make sure to check out the H3 podcast. The second podcast that you should check out on YouTube is called Impact Theory, hosted by Tom Bilyeu. Tom Bilyeu is one of the co-founders of the company that make those Quest protein bars and recently has focused a lot of his energy on personal development. So naturally, on his podcast, he talks to the top people in this field. That includes Jay Shetty, Mel Robbins, Simon Sinek, David Goggins, just to name a few here. And especially for personal development talks like those, I find it very beneficial to have video and not just audio. Those people are highly trained to form a very quick connection with their audience, so it really helps to not just listen to them, but instead see them, especially if you want to fully immerse yourself. The third podcast that you definitely need to check out on YouTube is a little bit of a wild card. And in fact, at the beginning I wasn't sure if I should include him in this list because he is such an unconventional podcast host. But I watched a couple of episodes and they were all really funny, really intriguing, and went surprisingly deep. I am talking about Mike Tyson's new podcast, Hot Boxing. Now let's be honest, when you think of Mike Tyson, there's a lot of things that come to mind, but podcasting is maybe not the first choice. However, Mike Tyson has become a lot calmer in recent years. He's a really good listener, almost a bit spiritual, and I genuinely enjoyed the conversations that he was having. Of course, it doesn't hurt that he has fantastic guests that all have interesting life stories to share. A short while ago, his podcast with Eminem went viral, but before that he also had A-list guests. For example, Tony Robbins or Jimmy Kimmel. In all of those conversations, there's just so much mutual respect. Because everybody loves Mike Tyson, right? Everybody has memories of him fighting back in the days. Everybody basically grew up with him. So all those guests are really honored to be even on his podcast. Now, given Mike Tyson might not be the most eloquent speaker, but in my personal opinion, he makes more than up for it with his genuine interest in the guest and almost in life itself. So if you're interested in a new podcast that is on the rise, definitely check out Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. Alright, we are moving quickly through this list. Podcast number 4 is the Joe Rogan Experience. And if you know anything about podcasts, you kind of saw that one coming, didn't you? Joe Rogan still has one of the most popular podcasts in the entire world and really revolutionized podcasting on YouTube specifically. He is by far the largest podcasting channel on YouTube, and I really don't know anyone who utilizes this medium as well as he does. On top of being able to have 3-hour conversations and still keep the audience hooked and interested, he also slices up those long conversations into shorter clips and then publishes them separately. And that actually works fantastically well. A lot of those clips get millions of views, and I personally also enjoy not always having to watch the whole 3-hour conversation. Instead, I could just watch a 10-minute highlight on a topic that I'm particularly interested in. Another reason that the Joe Rogan Experience is as popular as it is, besides Joe Rogan's crazy work ethic, I mean, the guy puts out like 5 videos every single week. I believe it is important to mention that he covers such a wide variety of topics. So if you're interested in comedy, no problem. Joe Rogan is a top comedian and he invites his friends onto the podcast. If you are interested in the UFC, no problem. Joe Rogan is the main commentator of that organization, so he knows all the fighters, all the coaches, all the experts as well. If you want to listen to nutritionists, to extreme athletes, business moguls, or astrophysicists, Joe Rogan has them all. So no, I don't listen to every single episode that Joe Rogan puts out, but I always know there will be a next first-class guest that I would love to listen to for 3 hours or more. And the last podcast on this list is called School of Greatness with Lewis Howes. You might know Lewis from books like this one or this one, but he has also been an avid podcaster for many years now. So if you check out his channel, you might find interviews with Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, Wim Hof, Mel Robbins. And what I particularly like about Lewis's interview style is that he really wants to let his guests talk. He is not trying to be the center of attention, he's not trying to push his own agenda, he's simply there to listen and ask the right questions. So I really enjoy the vibe that Lewis is bringing, and it really shows in the conversations. They are not very confrontational, but sometimes that's exactly what you want to listen to, right? Sometimes you just want to listen to 2 people exactly on the same wavelength, talking about potential, increasing their opportunities, and living life to the fullest. So here again, a list of the best podcasts on YouTube right now. Of course, I know that this list is vastly incomplete. There are so many good podcasts out there that would actually deserve to be on this list. So maybe I'll make a follow-up video. But for now, I hope that you enjoy this list. I hope that you learned about some podcasts that you weren't aware of before. And if you did like the video, feel free to subscribe down below so you get more videos about personal development, happiness, and yes, also about podcasts in the future. Talk to you next time.